A lot of news to get to. Here is the first bit of news. These were schools that the Pac-12 were in discussions with, and it looked like this was going to happen, that the Pac-12 was going to end up with schools that now Ross Dellinger saying that they have recommitted to being a part of the American Athletic Conference and will not be leaving for the Pac-12.
That is that's a blow to the new Pac-12, because I started to wonder after reading some things this week when they said new Pac-12 or stay where you are, what was the benefit to all of that? And I don't know if the new Pac-12 is a benefit. If it's just going to be another G5 league, why not stay in the G5 league that you're in, that you're comfortable with? So I don't know where they're going to go now, because now the AAC has said no. We're going to get to some Mountain West news in a second. Their options to get to 8 are not as good as they were a week ago.
Yeah, and let's mention those teams: Memphis, South Florida, UTSA, and Tulane. Those are the 4 teams: Memphis, USF, UTSA, and Tulane that have committed to the American Athletic Conference today in a group statement on the Twitter page of the AAC, and saying they're prioritizing student-athlete welfare. They're proud academic institutions. I mean, the typical kind of rah-rah stuff, but they say, while we acknowledge receiving interest in our institutions from other conferences, we firmly believe that it is in our individual and collective best interest to uphold our commitment to each other. Together, we will continue to modernize the conference, elevate the student-athlete experience, achieve championship-winning success, and build the future. So that was part of the text from the AAC. So Memphis, all of that talk and all of that hope for a fan base that has been teased by the Big 12 on a couple of occasions, thought maybe there'd be an opening with some of these other realignment moves. Memphis staying put, that's significant. That's a big brand that's been out there, and you look at like who's kind of teetering on the G5 making a jump. It would be Memphis right near the top of the list. Same thing with USF, who's been involved in these conversations. Tulane's been involved in plenty of these conversations. I mean, they've been connected to the Big 12. They've been connected to the Pac-12. And now here they are, and they're going to stay put as well. And then, more of the new booty is UTSA. And we saw some comments from Jeff Traylor the other day that, indicated there had been discussions, but that they had to get the money right, and that there was some questions unanswered that they had to figure out. And so I guess they got the answers to those questions, and the answers weren't good enough to make yet another move for UTSA, which had just joined the Americans. So that is just a blip of the news and what has been a pretty busy day in realignment, but it is a significant piece of news, because you would have thought that if not all 4, some combination of these schools were very likely headed to go be a part of that new pack, add to that TV package they're trying to build up. In some cases, in the eyes of their fans, maybe take a step up towards being in a better position. But instead, that is huge news that they are going to go stay put, and those 4 are going to stay together, and their fan reactions have been all over the place.
Well, and this is going to be, in some ways, a little bit more money for the schools that decide they're going to stay in the American Athletic Conference. Tim Pernitti, of course, the commissioner, is exploring private equity, new distribution models, expansion, and more. So that is great news for the American Athletic Conference. Also today, the Mountain West Conference. Gloria Nevarez, of course, has been doing her business as they look like they were going to lose teams, and they are. But also there was thoughts that Air Force would be leaving for the Pac-12, and the Air Force is now committed to remaining as a part of the Mountain West Conference. Their superintendent, otherwise the AD, released a statement, and they are going nowhere. Meanwhile, there is the story today about Gonzaga. They have been out there. Of course, the Big 12 has looked at possible basketball schools. UConn's always been in play. But Gonzaga will be, in fact, adding themselves to the Pac-12.
According to one report, as we were talking about before the show.
I think you may have missed that part. Craig was saying John Rothstein has now conflicted that and said that that's not true.
Well,
so Brett McMurphy has one thing, John Rothstein has another. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Brett McMurphy's saying that Gonzaga's agreed to join the Pac-12. And we love Brett, and Brett's been spot on a lot of the realignment news, so we'll see who's right in the end. But he did have that out there just a little while ago that Gonzaga was going to be joining the conference, and leaving the West Coast Conference, Pac-12 still needs minimum, but Gonzaga, even without a football team, will receive a full conference revenue share in the Pac-12. So he's not just saying like, hey, he's like giving details. Like they're going and they're going to receive a full conference share even without a football team. But then very shortly after, John Rothstein, who's pretty plugged in obviously on the basketball side of things, said, without mentioning Brett in particular, contrary to reports, Gonzaga currently has no deal in place to leave the West Coast Conference for the Pac-12. So that remains to be seen on who will ultimately be right there. But you had some celebration on the Pac side of things because, hey, the Gonzaga basketball brand makes a lot of sense to add to what they're trying to put together and make it more attractive. And the location makes a lot of sense. So why not? But it looks like that is on hold for right now, or at least is not as finalized as Brett McMurphy has heard, or maybe John Rothstein's not hearing right. We'll see in the end, but there's obviously some interest in adding Gonzaga.
Two guys that do a great job at what they do, so that'll be interesting.
And a source off here, so we'll see what happens there. But Gonzaga is going to continue to be in the news, and wherever they land will be of interest, of course, to a large portion of our audience that are Big 12 fans because there's been so much talk about that.
Yeah, no, Gonzaga and UConn, again, because of the Brett Yormark scratch itch, the itch that he has when it comes to men's basketball. Now, we will get to what UCF has this weekend, what Utah, BYU, and Colorado did, what Tech, West Virginia, Cincinnati did. We'll have our pod at about 4 o'clock today. And then also, oh boy, K-State, Kansas, Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma State, Houston, in different ways, a rough weekend. We'll have all of that here in just a moment. But college football this weekend, we have ourselves some bangers. There have been a few, and then it kind of dipped off a little bit. Number 2, Georgia. At number 4, Alabama. In fact, Graham Coffey covers Georgia, will join us on the show later today. Illinois, coming off fresh off the win in Lincoln in overtime, will play at number 9, Penn State. Louisville, unbeaten with Jeff Braun, will play at Notre Dame. And then in the Big 12, despite both teams losing, still a top 25 matchup between Oklahoma State and Kansas State. The two teams that they got bloodied over the weekend in different ways.
Yeah, they're actually – I could have picked the tiebreaker for Pick'em to be Georgia and Alabama, but that math is probably too high. I just don't want to do that. I picked that one because I think it's probably a little more difficult to figure out how that game's going to go. Oklahoma State all of a sudden can't run the ball. Now, granted, Utah has a really good defense, but that's not the first time that Ollie Gordon hasn't been a factor in a game.
It's been the whole year, dude.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So I said, it's not the first time that's happened. And then Kansas State, I just think they have some growing up and maturing to do because they got caught flat-footed early in that game and never regained their balance. And BYU's got something cooking in that they just don't care what everybody says about them on the outside, and they live in the moment. So
they had more than just offensive points put up as they toyed with K-State, and a lot of like grumbling out of Manhattan. I saw even some that, man, they do have one of these every year. We'll get into that. By the way, Greg Wrubell, voice of BYU, will join us today at 4:25 as they're coming off that win and playing in Waco coming up this weekend. Garrett, let's bypass the top 25 and get to now the games in the conference, including looking ahead and backwards. We'll have our pod again at 4 where we dissect it a little bit more. But how about UCF hosting Big Noon Kickoff on Saturday before they play Colorado, coming off the Hail Mary with no time left. More on that in a second, too, as the Buffaloes with a huge win at home in a game where really Baylor kind of dictated most of the tempo until they could have put the game away with a field goal. They didn't do it. So UCF will host will host Big Noon Kickoff as Fox is going to Orlando for the game between the Knights and also Buffaloes.
Yeah, that's a great spotlight for those programs, and it's the least that Fox could do after that BS over the weekend of having Big Noon Kickoff at Ohio State Marshall, because who gives a crap other than Ohio State fans? I mean, seriously, that game was never competitive, and that, in the light of having Utah and Oklahoma State dangling right there, really makes you question of just what type of priority the Big 12 is for Fox if they're choosing Ohio State Marshall over a top 25 matchup. So I'm glad that they alleviated my fears a little bit on how this whole Fox partnership was going to go moving forward, because they are going to go shine a spotlight on a pretty big game in the Big 12, and that's good. That's good, because I was really wondering about that, sitting in an airport seeing Ohio State just kick Marshall over and over and over again with very little pushback. So I think that's deserved. I think that it's going to be an excellent matchup, and I think this was an incredible weekend for the Big 12. Definitely a lot of ugly coming out of this for some teams, a lot of great coming out of this for other teams, and as much chaos as we had talked about for the last year in terms of what we expected from this conference when it came to football and basketball. I'm assuming we're going to see a lot of the chaos carry over into that as well, but in football, we thought this 16-team league with everybody pretty even would be pretty even and could result in everybody beating up on each other. And through the first couple of weeks of conference play getting underway, that's kind of what it looks like, although if there is one team who's not feeling like that will be the case, it's Utah, because they took a backup quarterback to Stillwater, a.k.a. one of the toughest places to play, and made it look pretty easy, beating Oklahoma State. You're seeing Alan Bowman get benched during that game only to come back and try to rally them. I think you felt a little bit better by the end of it, I guess, a little bit more positive about maybe moving forward if you're Oklahoma State towards the end than you did certainly in the beginning, in the middle of that game. But who's going to jump up and beat Utah? I mean, I think they're the one true playoff contender right now in this league. Of course, whoever wins the league is going to be a contender is going to be in the playoff. But as far as the possibility of getting two teams in, like Utah's the only one that's got to feel good about where they are. Everybody else is going to be skating on thin ice because they're already all sitting there with a loss or two. So it's going to be very interesting because we're just getting started here.
BYU sit there going, hey, we might have a double
BYU as well,
And UCF hasn't lost yet either.
And they host Colorado,
Yeah, I mean, that's a yet thing, and we don't know. And look, yet for Utah is probably coming as well.
That was supposed to be a test for Utah is my point. No, exactly. And they won in Stillwater with a backup quarterback. So it's like, who's going to beat them?
Yeah, A+ on the test.
Physically beat them up.
Yeah, A+ on the test,
42 minutes of time of possession. Paul, go ahead. 249 yards rushing to 48. Bowman could not complete passes. As you said, he was benched. That's a flex from Utah, no question.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I reached out to a Gonzaga source of mine to help sift through.
Oh, yeah, him.
Yeah. I did reach out to a Gonzaga source of mine. Now, he doesn't work there anymore, but he works down the street.
He does, yeah.
He works down the street. So I asked him. He says he thinks right now at this moment both McMurphy and Rothstein are right in that McMurphy says leaving, not left, and Rothstein says no deal is in place or whatever.
Could be both, yeah.
He says, so he's just saying nothing has been signed or a formal announcement. The AP has it the best, saying that they are in talks.
Okay, well, that's part of it.
That looks like it's going to be inevitable, and that's good that they're probably they're coming from different places. And I would add one more thing on the expansion talk that we rolled over, but Dellinger also reporting that Air Force has committed to the Mountain West.
We had that, yeah. Glad you. No. We had it. We just didn't get to it. But I'm glad
that
you
was also
that.
notable because that's another team that's been talked about in the possibility of moving around, and so the Air Force Academy have committed to remaining in the Mountain West and will soon sign a new grant of rights deal with financial incentives. So it's been a really interesting day from a realignment and especially a Pac-12 perspective.
I got to think the Pac-12, even though they had their moment last week and it looked like they were going to be in another surge, that's got to be kind of a disappointing thing that they aren't adding those schools that were Memphis, Tulane, USF, and who knows what still might happen with UTSA or many others or any others, but Air Force also now committing to stay in the Mountain West. Now, I have these categories. We can touch on this a little bit and then get into the Colorado finish against Baylor and K-State's disaster as BYU just pummeled them, and the 5-layer burrito bet. What is it about fans putting these things up on social media like the Florida State fan did 2 or 3 weeks ago?
What it is just, hey, look at me. I'm not going to actually do this, but, hey, I'll get my 5 minutes of fame.
Now, this guy says he's doing it.
I'll believe it when I see it.
He says he's doing
I don't want to see it.
Well, inform the people who don't even know what we're talking about here.
Go ahead, Garrett, to the one that says 5-layer burrito bet, if you wouldn't mind. So a Kansas State fan, this is what he said prior to the game about K-State and BYU.
I think it's further down the list.
If K-State loses to BYU, I'll shove a beefy 5-layer burrito up my blank. And they lost 38-9 or whatever the score was.
Sounds like you just wanted to have a reason to do that, actually.
No, the better part of this was BYU football's account responding to the tweet with "Live Moss," the Taco Bell slogan.
Yes.
And that is just a classic clapback there, BYU. And apparently St. Bill Snyder, this is the user on Twitter who posted this, posted a video today saying he's going to do it.
9:30 or so on Saturday night or something like that.
I mean, that's great and all, but I don't know about you guys. I'm going to not watch that, and I have no interest in that. And, again, like, of all the things you could say, like, Paul's like, what bet should I do? I'll do a keg stand. And I'm sitting here doing, hey, we get to 100,000 subs. I'll take my hat off for the first time on this show and do a whole show without it. And this guy's – I'll take Taco Bell food and shove it up my where does your brain go? Because my brain doesn't go there. But if you're going to follow through on it, I mean, kudos, I guess, for sticking to your word. But yeah, I don't know anything else you could have thrown out there into the universe. And this is on the heels of the Oklahoma fan who, what was that promise? He promised I don't even remember what it was, but he disappeared. His Twitter account got deleted.
Florida State fan.
Or no, it's Florida State fan, yeah. I was thinking of two alien.
He went dog crap out of a red Solo Cup.
Yeah, and he's disappeared. By the way, everyone in the chat, Craig Holy, my God, Fred, funny Craig, only 5 layers, and then, as Craig said, just needed a reason to do it.
No, so this is probably
I'll shave my head. I'll do a keg stand. No, I'll do this.
Here's the deal. This is probably something he wanted to do and needed a reason. That's a good explanation. I don't want to watch it. I mean, my mind's gone wild with the physics of it because a BB 5-layer burrito is not like a solid thing. I mean, it's kind of squishy.
It's a large – he's putting it in the freezer.
Oh, I mean,
he's going to freeze it.
Again.
I don't know. Look, all right, let's get away from that. But I'm
not here to govern your bedroom, pal.
So, all right, Utah flexed. BYU flexed. Colorado found a way. Here is a tweet from one of our weekly guests and CBS and ESPN analyst, Taylor McCarg. That is 1,000% on the coaching for Baylor. Rush 5 press coverage on a Hail Mary, unbelievably bad by the staff. And Taylor sent us a text during that moment. So Dave Aranda explained at the end of the game, he called it, by the way, the victory cigar coverage, that the right defensive end was not supposed to crash, that he was supposed to maintain the edge. He didn't. Shedeur got outside. Just before he's hit, he throws a BB. Great catch in the end zone right there. Great comeback by Colorado because Baylor seemed to have that game, as I said earlier, not in control, but they always kind of had that thing where they needed it to be. And then the fumble by Dominic Richardson at overtime after Colorado scored pretty quickly. That is I asked this question. Is this among the UNLV-type losses for Baylor in their history, or is that going too far?
No, because that one was just pure hubris. This was a bad call, but it wasn't a hubris, I don't think. I don't think it was that. It was a really bad defensive call. It was really poor execution.
Was it a bad defensive call? That's what Taylor's saying. But if you hear Aranda, if you don't let where Shedeur rolls to his left collapse, then maybe he doesn't get such a free shot.
I don't think Aranda called for guys to slip and fall down or not come up and play the pass. I mean, that was you can place the blame where you want to. I do think there was some element of the teaching obviously wasn't there all the way that it needed to be.
Absolutely.
So there's moments in that game where you can blame the coaches. There's also moments in that game where just watch it and you watch the players falling down and flailing and Colorado's players jumping up, making plays, doing the things they had to do to win that game. One team went out and had the killer instinct that they saw the opportunity to win that game, and they went and they made it happen with the opportunities they had. Travis Hunter forces a fumble. Shedeur gets away, throws the pass. Receivers jumping up and making catches. And they even had
after they lost the play after they had one drop.
I wanted to say that after they had the play where they dropped the Hail Mary, they got over it and they went and did it the very next play.
Yep.
Whereas Baylor, make a field goal. Go up 10. The game is over. You missed the field goal.
Yep.
You have an opportunity to tie up in overtime, cross the goal line, you fumble the football and give it to them, and you end the game on a fumble into the end zone. Like, you have no killer instinct. You have absolutely zero dogs that can finish a game, and Colorado, for all anybody wants to say about them, and I felt good about my Colorado takes after that game, by the way, where I haven't been like all on them and this is failure. Like, give them a chance to breathe. They are as high as they have been since Deion arrived after Saturday night. Whether you love it or hate it, they are now must-watch TV because there's actually a little bit of substance to it still here as we enter week number 5. But Baylor doesn't know how to finish. I can't remember the last big game they won under Dave Aranda. It's been like
Oklahoma
2 years.
on the road in 2022.
2022.
Yeah.
That's the last time they've actually gone into a big game and won it. And the damnedest, most disappointing thing about it all is they played, except for like one play, well enough to win that game. They had an incredible game plan. They rolled in there. They were focused. They were playing hard. They weren't intimidated by any of the flash and dash or being in Boulder or the altitude or any of that. They looked like they had their minds right to go and win that football game. But when it boiled down to who's going to go out here and grab this game and win this Colorado had the dudes to go and do it. And Baylor is back to the drawing board. And this is another week where instead of it being, hey, we actually won 2 games in a row and here's some momentum, it's herky-jerk, stop and start, win and loss, and it's just impossible to build things that way.
Well, yeah, and the safety's in the back of the end zone.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Wait, why would you be in the back of the end zone?
You have one-on-one on a Hail Mary?
Yeah.
No, it's so, Craig, everything you just said, I mentioned I agree with it totally. And where it comes down to, like, when I was picking this game, I knew it was going to be close, and I picked Baylor because I thought all of the little things would be in Baylor's favor. Colorado doesn't have game plans so much as they just have athletes. And what Baylor doesn't have is they don't have guys who are, like, there are 3 possible first-round picks on that offense for Colorado right now, and then a couple of guys will be on the second day. So they have those dudes. They have guys. Baylor doesn't really have those guys on offense, but the game plan was right. This was like all those little things are right. All they had to overcome was the minute they got a chance to put Colorado on the ground, they had to. But if you give Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter any kind of openings to make plays, those dudes are going to do it because that's what they do, and they both did.
Matthew McCallum, I'm going to disagree with you. You're saying we're taking the wrong take on this. It's not because Colorado had the dudes to do it. Colorado didn't remotely deserve that win from how they played. No, they have the dudes. The long throw to Travis Hunter in the first place. The play by Horn when he spun barely off the ground and made a big play. You beat Colorado by eliminating, or you're not going to eliminate, by making sure you don't give up too many explosive plays, and they did. And in the end, Colorado showed some balls by how they did what they did, won the game, and then Baylor kick the field goal, and none of that drama even gets into play.
Yeah,
Kick it. It's a 40-something yard field goal, make it.
I know that there's going to be a lot of people that look at that and don't want to give Colorado credit, instead would rather point to how Baylor choked it away. I think it's both. I think that, Dom Richardson didn't fumble because the ball slipped out of his hands. Travis Hunter made him fumble at the goal line. The Hail Mary had to be thrown by somebody and caught by another, and it wasn't caught the first time, and they went back to it, and it happened again. Like, Baylor threw up all over themselves. But it's a little bit of both. Colorado also went out there when they could have easily caved. They could have easily just been like, all right, that's it, man. We're out of this game. And they didn't. They fought hard. Did you not see how much that meant to them at the end of the game? Like, they desperately needed to win like that. And, yes, Baylor left the door open when they could have closed it and locked it. And that's the point. They didn't. And Colorado, instead of tripping over themselves and Shedeur throwing a pick or not catching the Hail Mary, they did the things they had to do, given the opportunity to win that game, whereas Baylor didn't. So if you don't want to give Colorado a ton of credit for that, I can understand that. But you have to give them some credit for that. It doesn't mean they're going to go win 10 games. But that was as big of a win as Deion's had since beating Nebraska, and at least one B with the Nebraska win, I would say, in his 2 years so far.
I would say TCU is still bigger.
Because TCU at the beginning. I forgot about that.
What we didn't know yet about TCU.
TCU didn't end up being very good.
No, but it was like it launched.
It was a big deal for them at the time. But yeah, I mean, that was a game that if you're Baylor, you are just absolutely nauseous after that one, because there was no reason you should have lost that game. But again, it comes down to players make plays, and they could not execute in the end, no matter how many opportunities they were given when it mattered the most. And Colorado did, and that's why the Buffs got that huge victory, and why it's back to the drawing board for Dave Aranda and the Bears, and seemingly never able to leave a place of just being not good, not bad, but just whatever they are.
They left the door open.
Yeah.
And they can't afford to do that. And, again, make the field goal. Why don't you put that on the kicker? Make the field goal. You kicked a couple of long ones the week before. Make the field goal. And the game is over. But, again, you open the door. Now, Kansas State has to be wondering what's going on with them. This is from Riley Gates. You hired Matt Wells for a reason. You pushed Will Howard out to make room for Avery Johnson for a reason. You got Dylan Edwards from the portal for a reason. The time to stop being conservative is now. If you don't do it, stop using it as an excuse. Then you're just incapable. That was a tremendous strength, power win by BYU. They scored in every way possible. And K-State now has no room for error after the loss to BYU in Provo. No room for error unless they go. You have to win the conference title. That's it.
Yeah,
because that's you don't have. Big 12 teams don't have a lot of room for error, and they got that's their mulligan.
Yeah, I mean
if they keep winning.
Yeah, if they keep. I mean, they're like Craig said earlier. Is there a second team coming out of this conference now? The way we look at it, no, probably not. There's not two teams that are good enough to be in the playoff if they got to that point where there could be a team that's the winner of the conference and another team that's in the 12. I just don't see it. And K-State they've got they've got some growing up to do, because they really looked like they didn't know what was going on the other night, and they were not playing the way that Chris Kleiman teams normally play. I think their fronts are not as strong as they have been. I think that they've got to figure out what their offense is, but pushing quarterbacks out the door for the young guy, sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. I mean, Oklahoma, it hasn't worked so far.
Yeah.
Paul, I never talk about your team, and here you are trying to make – no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we'll get into OU at Tennessee and all that.
As an example, they've just got some work to do, and maybe this isn't the year. Maybe it's next year's the year, because Avery Johnson will be another year in, but nobody wants to hear that.
Chris Kleiman
go ahead.
No.
I mean, just go ahead and say it.
Here's a note from Chris Kleiman from Landon Reinhardt after the game. He gave Kalani Sitake what was a very emotional embrace, like as if he's hurting. Kleiman, his team loses. There may not be a better man in the business than Kalani. Love the guy. As crushed as I am as how we played, I told him I was happy for him. They now come to Waco, but that was pretty cool to see Kleiman say that about a guy that we like quite a bit in Kalani Sitake.
Seconded, Chris. Really do like Kalani Sitake. Great guy.
Yeah, that was a cool moment, and we are huge fans of Kalani Sitake as well, so glad he's getting some flowers, and that was a huge win for BYU. It was an incredible win for the Cougars, and just a lot of really cool moments in that game. Got back from Lincoln and was able to watch that and really enjoy that with my sister and my brother-in-law, and we were just jaws on the floor when Parker Kingston returned that punt. That was an incredible play. They had a bunch of big plays in that game. Jake Ratzlaff has performed admirably and has really done well in the QB1 spot for the Cougars. It's not always flashy or perfect, but he's leading them well. And, you wonder just the competition in the offseason. You see why he's won it now, like between he and Gary Bohannon, the way he's helped guide them. But you see them winning because of a variety of different things, whether it's the defense making plays or Parker Kingston and special teams or the offense doing what they need to do when the time comes. They have started off 4-0 and have to feel really great because they were not a team that I was super high on coming into this year. I mean, just with the question at quarterback, even though we saw a little bit of Retzlaff last year and just not really knowing enough in terms of just like who was going to step up and make plays outside of like a Chase Roberts, and they've been able to just grind, man. That win in Dallas against SMU and now this win against Kansas State. Those are two big W's in this first month that have you feeling a lot differently, at least me feeling a lot differently about BYU's potential. I don't think they're going to go 10-2 necessarily. I don't think they're on their way to the Big 12 championship game no matter what, but they're putting themselves in a really good spot, and they're off to a start that's got them playing full of confidence, and it's a great thing to see.
Another team, guys, that was picked near the bottom of the Big 12, that annually this seems to happen, that has at least put themselves in the early conversation, even though it's just one conference game. They're 4-0. They won a game. Let's also not forget they won a game, what was it, at Arkansas? And now they win at home against Kansas State.
No, they didn't win at Arkansas.
Was it who did
Oklahoma State played Arkansas.
Who did BYU beat earlier this year? SMU in Dallas, who, of course, that gets to my next thing. SMU and TCU. Wow. An absolute blitzkrieg with SMU smoking TCU. Sonny Dykes getting ejected. Back-to-back unsportsmanlike penalty calls after an opening kickoff was called back. SMU dumped on their neighbor to the west and made them like it.
They did, and I had one follow-up is that's what BYU did. Let's take a moment to understand that, yes, they won that game. They beat the dog mess out of Kansas State. They beat them by nearly 30 points. When's the last time you've seen that with K-State football?
Yeah.
Especially a K-State football team that rolled into this league thinking, and many thinking, that they were going to be one of the top two, and they still might be when all is said and done. But I think we just need to appreciate that not only did BYU win that game, they beat the dog mess out of Kansas State, which is just something I don't feel like you see happen very often. So I wanted to add that to there. But for TCU, that was an ugly, unacceptable, maddening, disappointing, infuriating loss.
Yeah, and for sure, that infuriating was Sonny Dykes was infuriated. I'm curious on you guys' opinion on this. Every time we talk to Sonny Dykes, he seems like one of the nicest guys on earth. He seems that way to everybody around him. But I posit this to you. If you have a striped shirt on, he does not care for you.
Yeah, that's clear.
Yeah, he has anger. He has anger issues towards officiating. He really does. By the way, guys, just want to throw this in there. UTSA has committed to remain in the American Athletic Conference, too. That's another story with that. But SMU crushed them. Crushed them.
Yeah, I think we mentioned UTSA at the very beginning.
Yeah, I think it was in the tweet.
That was in the tweet.
Oh, okay.
That was amongst the four teams.
I'm sorry. I did not see the UTSA part. I'm trying to juggle.
We just needed to probably stay in one lane, I guess, because we are all
you guys,
swerving.
I do that, and then we interject. Yeah. That's part of this kind of the fun segment we have to open it all up. But, okay, now, Donovan Smith in Houston, shut out by Cincinnati. The Bearcats thumped them. Nice win for the Bearcats. He will still get the start for Houston against Iowa State, who rolled in their win. This from Joseph Duarte. Zion Chris will also play in that game. Boy, Houston's struggling, aren't they? They really, really are. Let's pass the basketball news on CBS and the Big 12, Garrett, if that's okay. Craig and I went to, with Jennifer and Daniel, flew into Omaha, went to the game on Friday. Just a note, Nebraska lost. That's what they do when it comes to close games. Here's a note about them, the Huskers, in overtime. They have now not scored in 7 consecutive overtime games, which also means if they got the ball first, they didn't kick a field goal or any kind of points, and then the other team closed them out. They have not scored in 7 consecutive overtime games, and they didn't get close to the end zone after Illinois scored in like 1 or 2 plays to take the first points and only points in overtime on Friday night.
Yeah, that was one of the most grisly overtime series I've ever seen. But glad that you guys got to go and that you got to experience it, and now it's shot into your veins, and you're probably not going to be able to stay away for another 65 years. I mean,
Well, me, Jen, and Daniel will be back at some point. I'm sure.
Yeah,
we'll get the. I
made it 38 years away from Fenway Park, and then once I walked through the gates, I was mad at myself for not going.
Yeah, no, I did not realize it's just something about the schedule and also high school football conflicts. But they have these nonstop flights. I don't think they always have from Dallas into Omaha. It's an easy, less than an hour drive. Garrett, do you have any of the pictures? There's Craig, Daniel, and Jennifer standing on the sideline prior to the game. We had sideline passes thanks to Dr. Elza and Matt Rule. And that is one hell of a running back from the University of Georgia and the Rams, and Todd Gurley, who was there on the sideline as they were having a conversation with him.
Craig, was he just like there?
Yeah, he was just there hanging out. My brother-in-law is a guy that just can talk to people. I mean, like he's just good about talking to people and meeting people. And so, of course, he was the one to go up to Todd Gurley and just like start chatting with him. And they were boys by the time this thing was like over, But thank you to all of the fine folks at Nebraska for the opportunity, to be down on that field for like an hour plus prior to the game, just to kind of take it all in from that vantage point was really exceptional and a once-in-a-lifetime type of a thing. It felt like because I never knew if we were going to ever go to that stadium or if I'd ever make it there. And so not only did we make it there, but we're sitting there on the field and sitting out there for quite a while. Could have watched the game down there, but I wanted to sit down. Like after a while, I was like, I want to sit down and not be tiptoeing trying to look over people. So we eventually did that, but not before. I got to see Todd Gurley down there, and he was just hanging out. And I think his connection to Nebraska was like their strength and conditioning coach, I believe, is what the connection was.
Used to be at Baylor. Campbell.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, what's his name? Corey Campbell.
Yep.
So that was the connection. That's why Todd Gurley was there. But they had a lot of other former players that were down there, not really recognizable guys. Not that Todd Gurley's a former player, but just in that area, there were a lot of other former guys down there. So it got crowded, and we eventually went up to our seats, and it was an incredible atmosphere.
Yeah, there's a picture outside of where they played the College World Series as we were on our way out of town with Jennifer, Craig, and me, and then also with Daniel. Garrett, do you have the video? Can you play the video? This was the video. Again, there's a shot of me on the sideline. This is the light show between the third and fourth quarter. And honestly, that place was 99.9% pure red. And you hear about the I've never been there. I've been to games. I've seen them take over stadiums. But that was an experience. Craig, what was your favorite part of it?
Just being there and being able to take in the history of that stadium, and just having not been there before, picking up all the ins and outs of what it's like to view a game there. Now I have a better understanding for the fan base and their pride and their turnout and their love for Nebraska football. I mean, you can kind of tell that pretty easily because it's the only show in town and in that state, but it's really evident when you're there just how much they love Nebraska. And, it was a sea of red, and it was an incredible in-game atmosphere. They did a lot of really cool things that I don't know how common all those are, but I thought that was an excellent game production of just having people excited. And you stand up most of the time, especially in that game. Kudos to Illinois. They played a great game. It was fun to watch Dylan Raiola do his thing. He's obviously a very talented player and had a couple mistakes that probably hurt them, but he's going to be excellent moving forward. And I just think it was a great Big Ten football game that didn't end the way you wanted it to if you were hoping for Nebraska to win. But outside of that, it was about all that you could have wanted in an experience.
And by the way, a field goal that they missed 3 minutes or so to go, just like the one Baylor missed, that might have given them what they needed. And that's something that they just don't do. They don't kick the clutch field goal. And they didn't, and they lost in overtime, and Illinois now gets to face Penn State this week. Blake Shapen is out for the year. Jeff Levy, the head coach at Mississippi State, put this up. Blake, of course, played his career up until this year at Baylor, the ultimate competitor, teammate, unquestioned leader in our program. They were beaten over the weekend, but he is now out for the year. Hate to see that news for Blake Shapen at Mississippi State.
Yeah, and, I'm sure he can get a medical red shirt and get this year of eligibility back, but you got to wonder how much longer, he's going to hang in there too.
I mean, there's a lot of comparisons to Charlie Brewer, and it's like that has continued to track of just seems like you can never just not have something go wrong, right? It's finally a new, fresh spot for him. He's in the SEC. He's back in the Southeast, and he's a starter, and this and that, and then he gets hurt. It's just like, I don't know, it just feels like one step forward, one step back sometimes with his career, and that's kind of how it felt with Charlie Brewer a lot of times as well. But I hate that for Blake. I think he was in a good offense for his skill set and was a good first-year quarterback for Levy as he tries to get this thing off the ground. Obviously, it's going to take a Herculean effort to get this thing off the ground because they're really struggling right now. But we're able to get the win over Eastern Kentucky, and so there's that. But, yeah, they're a bottom feeder in the SEC right now, and this is probably not going to help matters losing a veteran quarterback, but I don't think he was going to take you to extreme heights. So ultimately, I hate this for Blake. I hate this for him, and I don't know if this is how his career ends, but if it does, then good luck to you, and if it's not, good luck to you as well.
Ari Temkin with the Big 12 Network Radio show on TuneIn Radio will join us in the next segment. By the way, Chris Jenkins, congratulations. You won the college football pick'em contest from over the weekend.
9-1.
And 9-1. Yeah. And Samantha Duvall will be in touch with you on the gift card you get from TexasBeefHouse.com. $150 thanks to our good friend and everyday loyal watcher, viewer, supporter in Kim Coulter. Later on, news on LSU's dynamic player Harold Perkins. Florida State beat Cal, and a note from an ACC reporter on that. So much to get to. We can't do it all in the first segment. We